Did it work?
And Olga has just been packed with traffic as well. So if again, I see Rob on here already. So just as a note that we want to talk to all of them. Cody had a question already yesterday, and Master Moody, you and I and Master Smith and Mr. Dunn had talked about that one as well. Cody, you're having some issues, concerns about getting your student enrollment agreement going, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I wanted to basically going through our documents and just to simplify it, the enrollment, the trial enrollment form. I wanted to, we put online, put on Facebook. I wanted to get an idea as to just the gold standard, just a form that we could look at. And I know state laws are going to differ, but just like kind of the gold standard as to what needs to go where, what it should look like with the wording and things that we prefer to use.
Yeah. Let's talk about that briefly. I just posted several PDF examples and some Word doc examples. And if I recall correctly, the Mile High Karate ones I posted, unless it says otherwise, they were ones that we've done in Colorado for, I don't know, probably now 30 years or more. And for the recording and for posterity, neither Bob Dunn, myself, Greg Moody, Jeff Smith, nor anyone on our payroll currently, although I have had an attorney on my payroll full-time in the past, but no one on our payroll is an attorney. We're not qualified to practice law in Texas or anywhere else in the U.S., Canada, or anywhere else. So take none of this as legal advice, and take first of the admonition to have somebody run it by an attorney. What I always did with this stuff, frankly, is studied it well enough that I could put it together, and then I would go get it blessed by an attorney, rather than going with a blank sheet and saying, here, put this together for me. And
never do that.
No. Yeah. So I would put it together, and in your case, walk in with the Texas law on what's required, and then say, can you take an hour, which is going to cost you $400 or $500 or whatever, and just make sure I haven't missed anything that's going to bite me in the ass in Texas, right? And with our contract over the years, I at one time went to a company that would buy them outright and had them rewrite it so that it would be adequate for their purposes. And I had a couple different attorneys look at them. And I will say, again, we're not practicing attorneys, and I'll say that most practicing attorneys aren't necessarily very good, on stuff like this, unless they, for some reason, specialize in it. And there's no particular reason why anybody would specialize in this particular thing. You know what I mean, Cody? But as far as what's the gold standard, one conversation that we were having offline from everybody else about this yesterday is where some people get confused is the language in the student contract is different than the language you use in the sales process. And it's meant to be that, right? Is the language you want in the actual piece of paper they sign. And I like a piece of paper better than they ink it on an iPad or something. I want it to be as blatant and as straightforward and to some extent scary as it needs to be, including in big, 18-point font, this agreement is non-refundable, non-cancelable except under these provisions and so forth, right? In different states and provinces, some of you will have a 72-hour right of cancellation. In our agreements in Colorado, we don't, because I interpret that to apply to health clubs. I interpret it not to apply to us as martial arts schools, right? And I don't know whether I'm right or not. I've had this conversation with a number of people, but the language in the Colorado law is ambiguous enough that it would have to go to court, and there would have to be, a decision by a judge, and then that still wouldn't, necessarily set precedent. Does that make sense so far, Cody? So one of the things I like to have in it is very clear language. A moron, somebody with a 42 IQ who could barely read English looks at it and it goes, yeah, right there on both sides in 3 places it says non-refundable, right? I want to have it very clear that it's cancelable only under these provisions. What the provisions are usually will be dictated by some state law, but we always have it cancelable if they move a certain distance away from the school. We have it cancelable if we move the school. And again, a certain radius, right? We have it cancelable if they're permanently injured. And that's about it. Again, some states require, and I posted one for Maryland, I believe, which is some of the harsher laws in the U.S. And in Maryland, they require you be bonded if you take a cash deal. They require a 72-hour cancellation notice and some other things. So we built that all into the agreement, right? Something that I started also building into the agreement over the years was the fact that we're going to this is a trial enrollment. We're going to be talking about making a commitment to train to black belt and beyond within the first 90 days. And there's language in there that says that. So nobody can say, well, nobody ever told me. Well, it's right there in black and white, right? The other thing we built in over the years was a waiver for any photos. So if we do video, if we have video cameras in the school, if we take a photo and we use it in advertising, we built into the waiver into the thing. Obviously, there's the injury waiver built into the agreement. Most lawyers will argue that the assumption of risk and the injury waiver isn't worth the paper it's written on if you're liable, but it does have some benefit if there's any question. So an assumption of risk clause and an injury waiver clause. So, I want to have it very clear it's non-refundable. I want to have it very clear that it's non-cancelable except under, those basic conditions, 3 or 4 different points. They move, you move, they get injured, or in some cases, 72-hour right of rescission. Master Moody, what else am I not thinking of here?
Well, yeah, I think you covered a lot of pieces of it, but what's really critical and what you guys got to write down is that's completely different from the way you communicate verbally and the way your sales the way you present the price, the way you have features and benefits presented, the way all that stuff is done is completely different. And the other thing I was thinking, Master Oliver, after we talked yesterday on this, is the other principle that we talk about. It should be as simple as possible, but no simpler.
Right.
So don't add extra stuff and don't have your lawyer get excited and pay him $5,000 to review it and add a whole bunch of extra stuff and have it interpreted as things that it's not, or interpret your business as things that they're not. So the errors that we've seen happen in the past are that because we're not well defined sometimes in the industry, not in the industry, but in state law. So they don't have separate rules for martial arts schools versus retail businesses versus health clubs versus, other service businesses like dance studios, that you'll have a lawyer clump us in with one of those that he sort of picks out of his hat. And then there might be an oppressive law because a health club, a bunch of health clubs went out of business and they started having problems. So then they'll put a whole bunch of pages in their contract that are bad, that are unnecessary. So you don't need unnecessary stuff. Everything that Master Oliver said is necessary, but don't put unnecessary stuff. So that might be a question you guys ask later. Should I put in this in the document? And we can say, no, don't bother with that. So if you don't need the 3-day right of rescission, don't put it in there. Yeah. So leave stuff out if you can leave it out. So it isn't, we're not giving you, I think the answer here, Cody, is we're not giving you a straightforward answer because the answer is a little bit complex. You've got to kind of do a little bit of homework to. But
I think, Master Moody, you one of the areas, Cody, and clarify this, you were having a trouble with was the the description on the paperwork versus what you were having a conversation with the prospect on, right? So you say agreement, paperwork says contract, you say
Our
commitment.
Yeah,
terminology,
this clarified, and that makes sense.
yeah, our terminology to the client, to the student is always 100% of the time is membership agreement.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
we say,
well, and think about this. So I go through the enrollment process, and I said, you know, it takes, depending upon how you present it, but you know, I'll say it's 3 to 4 years to be a black belt. You know, Joey is 7 now. That means he could be a black belt when he's 11 or 12. He could be, in fact, a second degree black belt by the time he's 13 or 14. We start with a trial enrollment. It's only about a quarter way to black belt to begin with. And then I'll, you know, present the tuition. And then when I present them the agreement, you know, a lot of times they'll go, oh, I didn't realize we're signing a contract for 12 months. And I'll go back to my presentation and say, well, yeah, as I explained, it's 4 years to get a black belt, a couple years to get second degree. We're doing about a quarter of the way to black belt. That would translate to about 12 months as a trial enrollment. And then we'll evaluate in the process whether he's qualified to train to black belt or not. See, I even go back and then explain the contract in my same language, right? Because there'll be sometimes like a disconnect. And then they'll say, oh, am I signing 12 months? Yeah, you're doing a trial enrollment, you know, for quarter way to black belt. And I'll go back and use my language to explain it. Does that make sense, Cody?
that's an important concept everybody needs to get, because so often they say X and we respond X, but we shouldn't respond that. They say, why is it 12 months? Or why do I have to make a commitment? Or why is it this expensive? Why is it? But you know, what they're really buying is self-confidence, or what they're buying is this, what Master Oliver just said. What's the reason why it's 12 months? What's the reason why the renewal is 5 years? It's because they're making a commitment to second degree black belt, or they're making a commitment to whatever they're making a commitment to. And we explain, it makes perfect sense that way.
Yeah.
And instead we go, well, because it's 12 months. Well, that doesn't make sense at all.
Because you have to commit to a 12-month program, you know, and then you're back into weird language of, you know, you're on a green belt program. No such thing as a freaking green belt program. You know, you're enrolled a quarter of the way or a ninth of the way or whatever to black belt.
So you can't make it arbitrary. When you're answering questions, don't make them arbitrary. Make them based on goals and benefits to them. And that's what this means. It may sound a little abstract, but this is really important case, answering questions with some meaning to what they're based on what they're saying. So, you know, anyway, that's an important characteristic. I call that confirm, connect, continue. Confirm what they wanted. Well, this is what we were talking about. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Then let's go forward.
Yeah, and I'll add a couple of things here. One of the agreements that I posted says paid in full MHK. Here's the logic of that one. I want everybody to anchor it in. If you do a paid in full, let's say it's $35,000, and you try to do it on a credit card, and you just get a Visa card and you run it through your merchant account for $35,000, when normally you do maybe $8,000 a month and the average transaction is $300, they are almost guaranteed to freak out. Okay? What happens when they freak out is they hold the money. Then they want you to prove what it is. Sometimes they want to, you know, contact the card holder. But the reason that this contract is written the way it's written, and we wrote it in conjunction with Greg Cole, who's our recommended provider for merchant accounts, is the way it's written is if you do a paid in full for 4 years or for 5 years or whatever it might be, it's written as it's a 1 year paid in full that then has benefits that they get to train for free beyond that if they fulfill the 1 year. In other words, they're paying for a year and the balance of it's free. Because the merchant accounts don't like, because here's the way they view it, is they view that they're loaning you the $35,000, that student has until a year past the expiration of the agreement to charge it back. So that person can ask for the money back 7 years from now and legally still ask for the money back. So they look at it as they're loaning it to you for 7 years and may or may not be confident that if they go to take the $35,000 back 7 years from now, that there will be money in your account to take it back or that you'll still be in business, right? So we try not to ever show to a credit card company that somebody's paying for more than 12 months in advance, and even that's a long time in their horizon. Does that make sense to everyone? So the reason that's written that way is you're paying for this, all this other stuff you get for free, assuming you paid for this, right? So then the termination point of them feeling like they're at risk is 12 months from the day, not 4, 5, 6 years. Was that too quick? Did everybody understand that logic? The other thing is when you look at the samples I gave you, they have permit.
Master Oliver, if you want to go slower on that, you might want to put that agreement up. Yeah. And then.
Oh, this is simple tuition. So this is where it's on the member side. I posted the link in the Facebook group that this is what Master Oliver's referring to.
And the same, we should post the link directly to Jeff too there, Bob. You might make a note.
Okay.
But even if you're using, ASF or whoever for monthly tuition billing, I would recommend you contact Jeff to set up an additional merchant account. Because here's what's going to happen is when we start getting you really good at renewals, you're going to have people who want to give you a big stack of money. And what's working fine so far for your merchant accounts, all of a sudden it may not work fine anymore, right? Or if you go from $20,000 a month to $80,000 a month, your current merchant account might have been fine with you running $5,000 a month through their account, but all of a sudden if you're running 40, they're not fine. I always want to have a backup account. And the reason I'm talking about Jeff is because back in the financial crisis, we searched him down and then trained him on what martial arts schools were all about. It trained him on experience rate and he specifically will work with their risk management department to help facilitate this stuff. So that's why I make a big deal about that for no other reason than that. But to finish up on the contract thing real quickly is what we basically did over the years is, Master Moody, you've talked about it a lot of times, I talk about it a lot of times, is people will change their sales process or change their tuition or change their term because some mom complained about something or other, right? And then all of a sudden they end up not doing all the things they should do. I always took the opposite approach, which if somebody complained, well, you never told me about this, I wrote it into the agreement, right? So on the back side of our agreement is just a normal size sheet of paper, but it has intramural tournaments and it has testing cycles and it has lesson requirements and anything that we're going to require them to do. And it says, you're not signing up for any particular human. We can change the instructors. We can modify the curriculum. We can change all that. And some people I see, new staff members, I'll make them read and understand it. But people will see all that stuff and go, oh my God, people sign that? Well, here's the deal. Hardly anybody ever reads it, right? It's not like, every now and then you get a CPA or an attorney who's a pain in the ass and they try to go through every paragraph, but that's very rare. Mostly they say, what am I committing to? How much is it? Okay, liability waiver, no problem. And they sign it. They don't pay any attention to any of that stuff. Does that make sense to you guys? So it's pretty harsh. And you might notice on those samples, it says in big type, highlighted, under no circumstances is this agreement refundable in whole or in part. Right? So it's very, very, very obviously clear all the way through the process. Anyway, that's all I had on that. Cody, are you good?
Yeah, and that was the question. I wanted to make sure that the form, like the mile high routing form that you guys posted on there, that is the enrollment form that you guys are using for your initial enrollments.
Yeah, feel free to copy as much as you want under the understanding that you still need to vet it for what's required in Vancouver, what's required in Texas, what's required wherever, right? So it's in no way, shape, or form a guarantee that it's okay in your area. One of my pet peeves, some of you guys were EFC members at one time or another. My pet peeve with them always was they had this contract that they had written and vetted for Maryland, and had written and vetted for Maryland only for monthly payments. And they hadn't vetted it for taking a cash payment because they didn't want anybody to do it. And they hadn't vetted it for anywhere else. And then they would insist everybody use their version, which would only been vetted for Maryland. And probably still do. Any conversation I had to them to the contrary fell on deaf ears. Is they were always, well, why aren't you using our agreement? I say, well, it's written for Maryland, it's not written for Colorado, and I have vetted mine for Colorado, so I'm not going to use yours because it's not valid for what I need. So you do want to, vet it. But again, I would recommend you write it up, and then you have an attorney bless it, rather than go and have them create something, because God knows what you'll get and how many hours they'll invest. Right.
And a good attorney is just going to review for problems. If you have an attorney that's trying to, that's going to spend 15, 20 hours on it, they're probably not doing their job right. Probably. I mean, we're not giving legal advice, but probably.
We're giving advice on hiring attorneys. Go and tell them I want you to spend 1 hour on this, and here's what I know of as the relevant regulations, and here's what I'm concerned.
The horror story we saw was, on the front end, before people walked in, their student information sheet, you and I both remember this, it was about a 10-page, sign your life away document that Simon Chang one was 10 pages. And that was before they even took the intro lesson.
He was losing intros because they looked at it and said, I don't want to have anything to do with that, and turned around.
Yeah. And Sebastian's team, you guys had a question. We kind of ran ahead of them, ran over them.
Sebastian,
go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks for being the ringleader, Bob. Go ahead, Sebastian.
Yes. So this is Chris. Sebastian's right there.
There's Sebastian.
I had a couple questions. It might be an easy one. We were trying to start implementing the character development into our program. I was not able to access that on the website for the past meetings for the Sterling, Virginia one. And I was wondering, how could I get to those videos?
Well, what you want right now is you want the enrollment folder material. And what I do is I'd set a time with Bob, and he can walk you through it. All of the character development lessons and so forth are all in there in the quickstartmember.com site in editable format. So they're all in, I think, Word documents. So
Right. I printed those out, and I was looking at them. I love it. They're great. Just wanted to see how to implement the structure of them, as far as how to implement them with the current belt system and so forth. So I wanted to see if there was a video about that.
not per se, although we although damn near every meeting we've done over the last 28 months, as soon as somebody says that, Master Smith holds forth for 30 minutes on it.
Yeah, we need to have one module on that we can just send people to.
Yeah. Here is the main thing, and then I'm going to turn you over to Mr. Dunn and Master Moody here. And Master Moody, I've only seen Rob Adelick so far of our special guest. But and Ken confirmed that he was going to join us here today too. I haven't heard from Olga. But when you first, as a new member, here's our biggest thing that we fight. When you're brand new into the program, we want to accomplish three things. We want to get it where you've got a really tight enrollment process, where you're charging a reasonable tuition. And by reasonable, I mean maybe a floor of $197 a month. I'd rather you be at $247 to $297 a month. That's how big your balls are and how willing you are to jump up, with a minimum of $300 initially plus the first month to enroll.
Right.
So we really only have three objectives early on. Get you to that level of new enrollment tuition on a year agreement.
Done.
get a really tight enrollment ratio so that, from a movie theater, 50% of the intros you get or better are enrolling. From a referral, you're enrolling 80 or 90%. So really tight process. And then we want you to be able to, on a dime, open the spigot on demand and flood your school with traffic, right? And in the Parthenon of marketing, there's an awful lot of tools. There's public relations, there's internal referral mechanisms, there's family add-ons, there's movie theaters, there's big live events, there's paid advertising on Facebook, there's paid advertising with your website, Google, pay-per-click, there's paid direct mail, there's newspapers, magazines. I could go through a long list with variable effectiveness, though. But what we know is the movie theater thing is something where you can go make 150 appointments in a weekend. A big event like a marathon or something, you can go make 100, 150 appointments in a weekend. So we want to get everybody started on that. And then if you're over 100 active students, 200, 300, 400, 500, you should be able to flood your school also with referrals from internal live events and from events where one person brings 30 people and events where 30 people or 40 people bring 1 or 2 each, right? So what our biggest challenge is new members getting way ahead of themselves. What should I be charging for the renewal? How should the renewal process go? How do I get all my existing students into this leadership thing? How do I, train my assistant instructors to do this stuff? How do I convert my black belts and my brown belts to all this character development? And the answer is, once you added 100 students and jumped your gross by 20,000 a month because you're at 200 or more revenue per student and you've added 20,000, then we'll worry about all that stuff. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And the thing to focus on immediately on the white belt character development stuff is 2 things. One is I like to give everybody in the school a copy of What to Say, the Psychology of Winning, which is a simple, inexpensive paperback book. It has 10 chapters. Each chapter can be a lesson of the week. And so do that with white belts through black belts. And I will use that for 2 or 3 months and then give every student in the school a copy of What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. Now, over 4 to 6 months, you have indoctrinated everybody in the school that you're focused on success skills as well as physical skill set. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That makes sense.
Then you start your white belts with that new enrollment folder. And that new enrollment folder has, for the kids, let's say, it has the self-discipline sheet, the job list, the healthy eating, the other stuff I don't remember. But you start them with that folder and you get them used to earning stripes. And then when they test for their first belt, they're winning medals and trophies and stuff for earning a bunch of stripes for doing that. And the combination of starting all of your new students, starting now with that, and putting all of your students through those 2 simple books changes the mindset of the entire school. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So start with that. And then in the perfecting the enrollment process, what we're mostly focused on is it takes, 3 to 4 years or 9 years, whatever it is, to train to black belt. At the intro and the enrollment, we're pre-framing that this is a long-term thing, not a short-term thing, and that the enrollment is just a trial enrollment. Then when you add 100 new of those people and jump the gross by 20,000 a month, we'll have a nice set of fresh people to renew into a new hire program. Does that make sense? So,
yeah.
So sometimes on these meetings, you'll feel like we're saying, no, we're not going to focus on that. But it's kind of like a white belt who asks, I saw those brown belts sparring and this guy did that. Can I learn that? Well, of course you can learn that. We're just not going to learn that today. We're going to learn that after you know how to do a side kick, you know how to do a back fist, right? So keep in mind in relative
terms, what you're saying.
Yeah, in relative terms, not meaning to be insulting, but this is white belt class, right?
Funny.
But
Yeah.
keep in mind, is it Eric? Is that right?
Chris.
Yes, Eric. Keep in mind. Now, Master Oliver sent out. Sebastian's getting the. You're shipping out the monthly package, so you guys are getting the envelope. There's a progress sheet that's in that package. I need you guys to fill that out. All of our new members, I need you to fill those out. I want to set up and book Master Smith back to back with each one of you on that progress check, definitely in July. So we have to get it done in July. And we'll also set up for all of our new members too, make sure you're maintaining your stats, but a one-on-one out at this live event here coming up in August. So you guys are going to be there, right?
Yeah.
Right.